In this session, we will be seeing about different data types defined inside Python. In this slide, you can see these are the classification of different data types that is defined inside Python. Now you see there are 4 different data types defined under number type of data type. Under sequences, there are 3 types of data types defined. Under set, there is only one, it is called as set, and none is also none itself. And under mapping, we have dictionary data type. So that is only one type under mapping. Now let us first see what are all the data types coming under number classification of data types. Now under numbers data type, it is broadly classified into 3 and there is one sub-classification. So that is why I told you there are 4 different data types defined under number. So here you can see the first type is called as integer data type. The second type is called as floating point data type. And the third one is called complex data type. So that are the first 3 classification of number data type. Now under integer data type, you can see there is a subclass of data type and that is called as Boolean. And Boolean data type stores only 2 values. It can be either true or it can be a false. So now let us see what's an integer data type. An integer data type variable stores integer numbers inside it. So if I write a equal to 10, now you can understand value 10 is an integer. So if you are storing this value 10 into this variable a, then the data type of a is int. Now if I am using the variable a to store a decimal point number, for example 89.67, now you can see this decimal point number are called floating point numbers, right? Inside computer programming world, it is called like that. Okay, decimal point numbers are called floating point numbers. So now I am storing this floating point number into variable a. So now the data type of a is going to be float. Similarly, if you want to store a complex number into a, then data type of a is going to be of type complex. If you want a variable just to check 2 conditions, maybe like true or false, in that case you can define it as a Boolean data type. So if I write like a equal to true, okay, then the data type of a is going to be Boolean. So now you will have a little confusion why this Boolean is coming inside the integer data type. It is because when you are actually assigning the value true to a, actually the value of a is represented as a number inside the memory. So the true value is represented with any non-zero value available inside the memory. But false is always represented with a 0. So that is why Boolean data type is seen as a subclass under integer data type, because the value stored inside the Boolean variable is of type int. And one more thing, when you are storing this value true, T has to be capital letter. You remember we have studied this true and false, they are keywords, right? You have to provide this keyword element to a so that a will become Boolean data type. Now inside your program, you have a variable called a and you don't know what is the data type of this variable. So you have a function called type and you give this a inside the bracket. This function will print out, or this function will return what is the data type of a, whether it is int, float or Boolean or complex, whatever it is. It will print out for you so that you can understand what is the data type of this variable. The number data type can hold only a single numerical value at a time. So which means that if I have a is equal to 10 and after some statements in my program, if I make the value of a equal to 20, now this 10 will be erased. So now the new value 20 will be stored into a. So what do we understand? Variable a, being an integer, can store only one number at a given time. Okay, it can be an integer number, it can be a floating point number, it can be a complex number, but only one number at a time can be stored inside it. Now we have a small program just to make things clear what we have learned in the previous slide. So here I have created 4 variables. You can see here a, check, b and c. So value 10 is stored into a. So now Python interpreter understands the data type of a is int. Now here you can see value true is stored into check, so the data type of variable check is going to be Boolean. In the next statement, I have stored 20.67 into B. So if you see a decimal point, you should understand this is a floating point number. Now to store a floating point number, the data type of B has to be float. And this is how you represent a complex number. For example, 4 plus 6.8j, and you have to put that in bracket. And now when this number is getting stored into C, interpreter will assign the data type of C as complex. So how will you understand whether these data types are actually assigned by the interpreter? You can ask the interpreter to print the data type of each of the variable by using function type. We are trying to find the data type of A using function type. So this will print the value as int because that is the data type of A. Now the next print statement will print the result as Boolean. After that, the third print statement will print the result as float because that is the data type of B, and the last print statement is going to print the result as complex. So now it should be clear to you, by using this function type you can find out data type of any variable that you give inside it. So now let us run this program. Alright, our program is ready. You can see, don't worry about the first line because that is just the comment. We have already discussed what is the purpose of comment in the previous video. Alright, so interpreter will not see this line because it starts with a hash, and interpreter knows that this is just an English statement that is defining what is happening inside this program. Okay, so our program starts from here where A is equal to 10. So in the first four statement, I have just assigned some values into these variables, and after that I am trying to print the data type of each of these variables. Okay, so now let me run the program. So here you can see the first print statement is printing that the data type of A is int. You can see here. Now the second print statement prints the data type of check. It comes as Boolean because I have entered value true into variable check. Okay, so that's how the interpreter understands the data type of check should be Boolean. Now the third print statement prints that data type of B is going to be float, and the last print statement prints that data type of C is complex because I have just entered a complex number into variable C. So now let us continue. Now we are going to study about next classification of data type called sequence. And under sequence there are three types of data types defined in Python. The first one is string, second one is list, and the third one is tuple. Now the primary difference of sequence and numbers is that sequence can hold many values inside it. In the previous slide I already discussed with you, a number data type can store only one value at a time inside it, right? But with sequence, n number of values, maybe 5 different values or 10 different values you can store into a string, a list, or into a tuple. And there is one more thing, sequence is an ordered collection, which means the first value entered into any of this will be identified always as the first element. The second value entered to any of this string, list, or tuple will be identified as the second element. The third value will be identified as a third element. So this data types will preserve the order in which you make entry into it. Okay, so that is why they are called ordered collection. So sequence data type is a group of ordered data item that can be stored in them. Each item is indexed by an integer value. So now we are going to study each one of them in detail. So when we go into them, I will actually discuss with you what is the purpose of index value, and using index value how you can pick individual elements from a list or a tuple for processing inside your program. Now we are going to start with strings, which is the first sequence data type defined in Python. Now string can be a combination of numbers, letters, or special characters or spaces. Many things can be combined together and just stuffed it as a string and stored into a variable. A string is always enclosed in either a single quotes, you can write anything inside it, that will be taken as a string, or it can be enclosed in a double quote, you can write anything inside it, it will be taken as a string. The single quote or double quote is used to mark the beginning and ending of a string. So that's how the interpreter understands. By seeing the quote, it can understand this is the start of the string and this is the end of the string. Everything in between will be copied to the string variable. Now we cannot do numerical operation on strings even though the value is a number. So here you see inside a string you can store numbers, letters, special character, everything that the keyboard can type can be put into the string variable. So here you see you can even give numbers, but when you enter number as a string, you cannot do mathematical operation on that. You cannot add those numbers, right? You cannot multiply those numbers. But later we will understand there is a small function which you can use to convert the string numbers to integer numbers or maybe floating point numbers, and then you can do the operation on that. But if a number is entered as a string, you should be careful to not to operate it on any mathematical operation like addition, subtraction, multiplication. It will not work. So now let us take an example to understand it. Now in this program you can see I have created 4 variables over here. Now all 4 variables are string variables. Okay, so the first variable city1 is storing a string called London. Okay, so the value of city1 is LONDON, and this is stored into city1. And how interpreter understands this is the beginning of the string and this is the end of the string by seeing the quotes. Now next variable grade1 is also a string variable, but we are going to store only one character into it. Now the third string variable email, you can see this is a big string. Now inside here you have a combination of characters, numbers, special characters, all these things. So this is why I told you string doesn't care what character is coming from the keyboard, right? Anything you enter can be stuffed together inside the quotes and can be passed as a string. Finally, you see the last variable street number, which I represent as ST number, is actually storing a number 1, 2, 3, but it is represented inside quotes. So when Python see these quotes, Python will interpret this value as a string, and this 1, 2, 3 is stored as a string value into street number. So now after that I am just trying to print the type of each of these variables. Now I already told you all 4 variables are of string type, so you will just see the output coming as string 4 times, right? Because if you try to print the type of city1, grade1, email and street number, even though it is storing actually a number, it will be printed as a string. Now the second type of data type under sequence is list. It stores a list of items separated by comma and enclosed inside the square bracket. Now please remember this, list uses square bracket. Now values in list can be modified or changed later. So this is very important point. Only list and dictionary inside Python has this capacity. After you have created it, you can modify it. But for other data types, if you try to modify it, the earlier variable will be destroyed and a new variable will be created after that. So this is a huge advantage for list. You can modify or change it after you have created it. So in this program, we will study how list works. We are creating a list called stud1. So this is the name of the list, stud1. And inside stud1, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 elements inside it. The first element is 24. You can consider that is the age of the student. The second element is the student ID. The third element is the class in which the student studies. And the fourth element is a mobile number. Now you should understand inside the list, these numbers are represented with their position values. And the position value always starts with a 0. So the first value 24 is available at 0. The second value, this 34J3829, is available at position 1. The third value def3 is available at position 2. And the last value mobile number is available at position 4. These position values are called as index values. Index values are very important when you work with string, list, tuple, set, like that. For all of them, you should always remember index value starts with 0 and then it runs continuously until the last element. So using index value, you can individually work on elements inside the list. So we'll see that later. So in the next statement, I am printing the value of stud1. So this entire detail inside stud1 will be printed to the screen. So you will see 24, student ID, diff3 and the phone number. After that, I am trying to print the type of stud1 variable. Now the interpreter, when it sees a square bracket with some values written inside it with a comma, interpreter understands the data type of stud1 should be list. So now the second print statement will give the result as a list because the data type of stud1 is list. Now in the next line, this is where we are trying to modify the existing list stud1. So for example, now the age of particular student is written as 24, but later he comes back to us and say, my age is wrong, you have to change it to 25. So as being a list, you have the capacity to modify it. That's why I told you this is a big advantage for list. How can you delete this 24 and write 25 over there? It's very easy. That is where you will use the index value. Now to work on this individual value 24, you have to use the index value like this. So first you have to write the name of the list, stud1, then in square bracket, you have to give the index value, that is the position value, right? So if you have to work on the student ID, you have to give index value 1. If you want to change the division, you have to give index value 2. But right now I'm going to change the age 24. So now I will give index value 0, and then you can specify what is the new value that you want to store over there. So I will give 25. So when this statement executes, 25 will be copied into list stud1 at position 0. So now 24 will be removed, 25 will be written over there. After that, I will print the list again. Right now you can see the list starts with 25 with all of the values. And there is one more point that I want to discuss with you. When you make an entry into list or tuple or set or dictionary, what we are going to study after this, you should know if you are trying to enter a number, don't give a quote. If you are trying to enter a string, you can either give the string inside a single quote or inside a double quote. So here you can see 24 is a number. I didn't give any quotes for that. This is a string. Okay, so you can see it's a mixture of numbers and characters, so it has to be a string, so you have to put that in quotes. Def3 is a string. It's a choice actually. You can either go with single quotes or you can go with double quotes. It's up to you. Right, and then last mobile number should be taken as a number, so I am not providing any quotes to this. Okay, so now let us continue. Now we are going to study the next type of data type called tuple. List and tuple looks the same. The only difference is that tuple uses your regular brackets, okay, and list uses square bracket. Okay, so this is how the interpreter understands a tuple and a list. So you should not go wrong with this. If you want a tuple, you should use this bracket. If you want a list, you should use this bracket. Now tuple also can store a group of items separated by comma, same as list, but it should be enclosed in a curly brackets. And the value in tuple cannot be modified. So this is a fundamental difference between list and tuple, right? Tuple cannot be modified after you create it, but list can be modified any number of times. So now let us see the example program. In this program, I'm going to create a tuple, and the name of the variable which I am going to store the tuple is called days. And there are 5 elements inside this tuple, and the position value always starts with 0, the index value. So Monday is stored in 0, Tuesday at 1, Wednesday at 2, Thursday at 3, and Friday at 4. If somebody asks what is the number of elements inside this tuple, the answer is 5, because you can see there are 5 elements. But the index value will always start at 0 and it will go up till 4, one value less than the actual number of elements, because we start at 0. So now we have a tuple called days, and these 5 values are stored inside it. After that, if I call print function to print the values of tuple called days, it will just print the content of days, which is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. After that, I will try to print the type of tuple days, so the output will come as a tuple. So how the interpreter understood it's a tuple? By seeing the bracket type. And the last statement, I have just commented it. When we actually run this program, if I didn't comment it, it will give error. So assume that this comment is not there. Okay, so this statement is running. I am trying to change the value of this tuple day at position 0. So this is not actually position. We call it as the index value. Okay, so from now on, I will call it as index value. So right now, I am trying to change the value of tuple days at index value 0. So we are trying to remove this value Monday, and I want to put a new value Saturday over there. But we have already studied that tuple is immutable. Immutable means you cannot change it after you have created it. So here you see you have created it, and later if you try to push a new value into the tuple, it's going to give error. Okay, but if it was a list, it should have worked properly. So now I will first run this program by commenting the last line, and after that I'll run the program again by uncommenting this line, and then you will see we are trying to change the existing tuple and interpreter is giving us error. So now let us try that. So now you can see the last line, it is commented, so you can assume that this line is not there, okay, because interpreter is not going to work on that. So now I'll execute the program. You can see the first print statement will print the content of our tuple, so that is why the output comes with the content of the tuple over here. Now the next print statement is trying to print the type of variable days. Now we know that this variable days is of type tuple because we have stored a tuple value into it. So now you can see now the data type class is tuple. So now I am going to uncomment this line. Okay, so which means that now I'm trying to change the value Monday inside the tuple with new value Saturday. Okay, so at position 0, so I want to overwrite Monday available at position 0 with new value Saturday. So let us see whether tuple will allow us to do that. So now I have to save the program. I will execute it. Now we see we got error. Okay, so they say it's a type error. Now you can see the data type is tuple. Object does not support item assignment. So what the interpreter is saying that this days is a tuple item or a tuple object, and you cannot assign value into it after you have created it. Now the third data type under sequence is set. Now the biggest difference of set with tuple and list is that set is unordered. So it doesn't care which was the first element entered or which was the second element entered. It doesn't keep the order of elements that it stores inside it. So set also can store a group of items separated by comma, and set uses curly brackets. Okay, so now you should understand set, tuple and list are differentiated by Python interpreter by seeing the brackets that you give. Biggest advantage of set is that it will not process duplicate entries that you make into it. So when we see the example, you will understand. Automatically set will reject duplicate entries, right? So if you are storing data inside set, you can make sure that each item inside set is unique, right? Because set doesn't allow duplication. And here also the values in set cannot be modified or changed after you have created it. So now let us see the sample program. Now in this program we will see how the set data type works. Okay, so we have created a variable fruits which is actually of type set. Okay, so how the interpreter understands by seeing the brackets. Now the data elements that I am going to store into my set fruits, you can see I have purposefully made apple repeat 2 times. When you are trying to make a duplicate entry, or when I am trying to enter apple for the second time, set fruits is not going to give any error. But when you print the value of fruit, you can see it will print apple, comma, orange. Only 2 elements will be there. The last element is automatically rejected because that is a duplicate element. And after that, if I try to print the data type of fruit, it will be printed as set because the data type of fruit is set. And the last line I have just commented it. Here you can see I am trying to change the first element inside set with a new value, but we have studied set is also immutable, which means you cannot change it after you have created it. So this will give an error. That is why initially I have commented it. Okay, so now let us run this program. Alright, our program is ready. You can see the last line is commented, so you don't have to see that now. I will just execute the program. You can see I entered apple, orange and apple into set fruits. But when I print the value that is stored inside fruit, you can see it's only apple and orange. The duplicate element apple is not stored into the set. After that, I'm trying to print the type of variable fruit, and you can see the data type is set. So now I will remove the comment. Now I'm trying to change a data item inside an existing set called fruits, right? And it is illegal, it's not allowed. So I will execute it. Now you can see we got the same error. Set object does not support item assignment. Assignment is equal to operator. You cannot assign value grapes into position 0 to an existing set which is already created. So now let us continue. Now we are going to study the next set of data type called none. This data type is used to represent absence of value. Now you should know absence of value is not equal to 0, because 0 is actually a number, or it is not equal to false or something like that. It just means that right now we don't have a value for this variable. Okay, so in that case you can use none. So here you can see it is used to represent the absence of value. Now we should very clearly understand it is not equal to 0 or it is not equal to false. Now for example, phone number of a student. If you're trying to store all the student records inside your system using a Python program, you can ask each student what is your name, what is your roll number, or which division you are studying now, what is your age, because for all those questions every student has to give a proper answer. But assume that if you have a data to be entered for phone number, some students can inform that I don't have a phone number. Now in that case, what value you will fill for that variable? You cannot give 0 because 0 is an invalid phone number. You cannot give false. In that case, you can give none. It means that for this student, for phone number, we don't have a value. It's absence of value. So now let us see an example, then you will understand. Now this program is used to demonstrate the none data type. You can see first I'm storing a string called Sam into variable name. Next I'm storing an integer 16 into variable age. After that I'm storing place name Delhi to address. And the fourth variable phone, if the student doesn't have a phone, what value you will give here? So that's the question. I cannot give phone equal to 0 because 0 is an illegal phone number. There is no phone existing with value 0. You cannot give it as false because phone number is not a Boolean value. Store some legal phone numbers for other students, right? So in that case, you can enter none. So now when you enter value none into variable phone, now the data type of this variable phone will become none. Now after that, when you print the name, you can see the output will come as Sam because that is a value of variable name. After that, when you try to print the value of variable phone, the output will come as none. So our program is ready, so let me run it. Now here you can see the first print statement is printing the value of name variable. Okay, so that is printing Sam, and the second print statement is printing the value of phone variable, and here you can see it is none. So now let us proceed. Now we have reached the last data type. Okay, so the classification is mapping, and under mapping we have only one data type to study, that is called dictionary. Dictionary is also unordered data type. So dictionary doesn't care this value was entered first and this value was entered next. Now inside dictionary, the data value are always stored as a pair. So there are two elements for each data item stored inside dictionary. So here you can see a data item is stored as key value pair separated by a colon. Okay, so when you see with example, you will understand it. And dictionary also uses your curly brackets. It is very fast for retrieval of data. Retrieval means to get data. So if you are going to store 1000 records inside a dictionary, and if you want to find a particular person's record, okay, if you ask for that person, dictionary is very fast in retrieving that person's record from these 1000 records that it has stored in the memory. Key and value pair in dictionary is separated by a colon. So I have told you that before. Key and value can be accessed in dictionary by providing key value inside the square bracket. So we remember when we work with list, tuple, and also with string, we used to provide the position value inside the square bracket to access the individual element. And I told you position value always starts with 0. Now when you work with dictionary, inside the square bracket, you have to provide the key. Now dictionary will search in its records and it will identify what is the corresponding value to which this key is associated. So now let us see an example. Now here you see in this program, I have a variable dict1 which is of type dictionary. So how the interpreter understands that? By seeing the curly bracket and also key value pair. You can see this is the first pair, name Sam. This is a second pair, age 17, and this is a third pair, address Delhi. If I try to print dict1, now this will print the entire content of dictionary to the output. Okay, so we'll see that. After that, if I try to print dict1 with key value as address, now Python interpreter will search for all the key elements to find address. So it will search name because that is the key. It will search age, that is the key for this element, and it will search address. So now it has identified the key, and corresponding to this key, what is the value? That is Delhi. So this print statement will print Delhi as the output. And when you make an entry into the dictionary, always you should remember whether it is key or value. If it is a string, you have to use single quotes or double quotes, and if it is a number, you should not use quotes. That is common for all the data types that we have studied, but just I am reminding you once again. So now let me run this program. So now our program is ready. Let me run it. So here you can see I have printed the content of dict1, that is the dictionary variable that we have created. So you can see this is the output of that print statement. And in the next print statement, I want to print the value corresponding to key address. So inside the last element in dictionary, you can see we have the key as address and value as Delhi. So this will actually pick the value corresponding to key address, and that will be printed out. So here you can see it is Delhi. Now if you want to print this age 17, you just have to change this key with age. Interpreter will search the dictionary to identify key age, and corresponding value 17 will be printed out. So I will save the program and execute it. Now you can see 17 is coming here. Now based on the key, you can select the values available inside dictionary. Now when we were studying about different data types, I told you some data type can be changed after you create it, and some data types cannot be changed after you have created it. In this slide, we are going to study which data type can be changed and which data type cannot be changed. So you can see the slide heading talks about immutable and mutable data type. So what do you mean by this word mutable? You might have seen the movie called X-Men, right? So where you can see some people or some special human beings, they have mutated into something else, right? So because they were able to mutate from humans, which means they were able to change. So mutable means there is a provision to change. Immutable means you cannot change. So mutable data type means data types that can be changed later. Immutable data type means you cannot change after you have created it. You can see variables whose value can be changed later. You call it as a mutable variable. Immutable, so this variable's value cannot be changed after you have assigned it. Now if you try to change an immutable variable, then the old variable will be destroyed and a new one will be created in the same name. So that we will see with this example. So now let us see this table. So here you can see I have just formulated all the variables that we have studied into two sets, mutable and immutable. So majority of the data types that we have studied, integer, float, boolean, complex, string, tuple, set, all of them are immutable. They don't like to change after they are being created in the first place. So now there are only two data types which actually allows it, that is list and dictionary. For now, let us take the example of an integer. So I say that integer is immutable, which means you cannot change the value. But inside my program, if I write a is equal to 10, so you can see value 10 is stored into a, and later sometime if I write a equal to 20, my program is not going to give any error. So now you'll have a doubt then why we are saying it is immutable. You can see the value is changing. If you understand the internal operation of Python, then you will understand actually integers are immutable, which we will discuss in the next slide with an example. To clearly understand mutable and immutable data types operation in Python, we first have to understand how values are stored as objects and referenced by identifiers inside memory. So you should understand inside computer, you have your memory where we will actually store this value 50, 50, 100 and all that. So now this memory is called random access memory. Okay. When Python sees the first line, a equal to 50, so inside the memory, a small unit will be allocated, 50 will be stored into it, a new variable a will be created, and a will be pointing to this memory location. So a will be provided with an ID value, which is actually the representation of this memory location inside RAM. So it will be a large number. Each time when your program runs, it can change because you will be getting different memory location to store the value that you have assigned inside your program. So right now, assume that A got an ID like 176.163.15. for example. Now after that, our interpreter goes to the next line, b is equal to 50. Now you see, in order to save space inside the RAM, Python does this very intelligently. You can see already 50 is stored inside memory. So why should I take another memory unit and store 50 again? We are simply wasting the memory. So what Python interpreter will do, it will not write 50 again in another place in memory. It will just create a new variable b and ask b to point to the same location as a where you have stored 50. So now a and b are pointing to the same location inside memory, which means that ID of b also will be the same as a. Okay, so b also will be having the same ID 176.163.15. So now you see, I am going to change the value of a. It was 50 before. Now I am going to write 100 into it. So right now I am in the third statement. Now we know that the data type of a is int. And according to the previous slides table, we already know that a is immutable. You cannot change a. But if you write this line, your Python interpreter will execute it without any error. But you should understand internally what happens. Now I want to store a new value 100, which is not available inside the memory. So now a new memory unit will be taken for that. 100 will be written into it. Now you see, we already have a variable a which points to 50. This a will be deleted, will be destroyed. It will not be reused. That is why we say integer or floating point number or a string is not mutable. It is completely destroyed. Now a new a will be created that will be pointing to 100. And of course, the ID value of this a will be different than what we had before because it is pointing to another location in memory, right? So it will have ID value maybe 186.17135, something else. So this a is gone. So right now this is the situation. B is pointing to 50, A is pointing to 100. They have different ID. But you should understand the earlier A is not equal to the new A that is created. They are completely different. So that is why we say integer is not mutable. If you try to change the value of integer, that variable will be destroyed, a new variable will be created, and the new value will be assigned into it. Now we say that list and dictionary are mutable. So let us say what happens here. So I am creating a list called stud1. This is the same list that we have used inside the previous program. So now a new memory unit will be allotted for storing this list. Now this list has some big values like 24, 34J, 3829, then diff3. After that, it has a big phone number. Everything will be stored over here, and a new variable called stud1 will be created. The type of this variable will be list, and it will be pointing to this location. And of course, stud1 will get an ID, and that ID will be completely different from everything else because it's a new memory location. So for example, I would say this is 19161.361. Okay, so this is a new ID value for stud1. Now see the last statement here. You can see in stud1 at position 0, I want to write the new value 25. So 25 will be written over here. Now you see list is mutable, which means list allows data value to be changed after it is created. So now once interpreter executes this statement, inside memory this 24 will be removed and 25 will be written over there. As list is mutable, this memory location will remain the same. the stud1 will remain the same. The ID value will not change. So that's the difference of mutable and immutable data types. Now this is the last slide for this session. Now we have discussed about different data types, okay, in this session. But now you will have a confusion when I will use which data type. So you should understand, based on the situation or based on the question, you have to decide whether I should go with a list or a tuple or a set or a dictionary. So in this slide, I will give you some hint when you have to use those data types. So how to decide data type for storing the value that you have in your hand. So list can be used to store collection of data item in which you expect a lot of updates. For example, your class student list. Okay, so every year it keeps on changing. Some student will go from this division to the next division, and some students from there will come back to your division, right? So the class list will keep on changing. So if you're trying to store all the students' name inside of a class into Python program, you better create a list and store these names into that, because later point of time you can change it. Now when we use tuple, when we do not need any change in data. For example, tuple is immutable. If you want to store all the weekdays like Monday, Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it's not going to change. For example, months of an year, January, February, March, April, May, June up till December, it will never change. So if you want to store this kind of static data, which is not going to change in near future, you can use tuple to store those kind of data. When we will use set. So when our requirement needs that the data that we store should be always unique and we don't want duplicate inside it, you can go with set data type. For example, if you're trying to store the register number for hall ticket of all the students, you have to store the register number into a set. Why? Because you know that two students cannot have same register number, right? So if you accidentally enter same register number again, your set is automatically going to reject it. So we can be sure that the entire elements stored inside set are unique and each student is going to get a different register number in their hall tickets. And the last one, dictionary, when we will use this. This is used for fast search and retrieval of data, and it also supports updating. Now one such example is a contact list that is stored inside your mobile phone. Okay, so how will you store the contact list? You will store the name Sam, and after that you will store the mobile number. So this is the key and this is the value. And once you provide the key, search for Sam. Dictionary is very fast in searching and retrieval, right? So even though you have thousands of records inside your contact list, within a fraction of a second, dictionary will identify the contact of Sam and it will show you the phone number. So that will be all for this section.